I'd like now to turn the microphone over to Stefan Tanaka, who, without further ado, will introduce our keynote speaker for today. So.
I get the pleasure of introducing Alan Christy, and had Alan 20 or 30 years ago. We were both trained at the same school to do basically Japanese, what we would call intellectual history. And the craziest idea would have been that the two of us would be talking to scholars, students, about the computer, things called digital, something about the humanities, and arguing for collaboration, new modes of thinking, transforming the humanities. We would have just kind of laughed and said, no way in whatever that would this have happened. But here we are. And so it's a real pleasure to introduce him. And what he's, the formal stuff is that he's professor of history at the University of California, Santa Cruz. He's provost of Cowell College, and probably has the nicest house on the California coast right now. It really, it's true. I've been in it. Not because of him. It was from a different meeting, but it's just stunning. So that's his qualification for everything. And he's director or co-director of the Center for the Study of Pacific War Memories. Now, he's written he's written a wonderful book on the founding of a discipline called ethnology in Japan. It's on Yanagita Kunio. But the important thing here, it's on folklore. And so he's always been interested in the relationship between narratives, stories. He's interested in the foundation of ideas and how then they're institutionalized in different ways. He translated a book of probably the most innovative historian of his generation, Amino Yoshihiro. Here, Alan represents something that a former colleague wrote a book called Off-Center. Alan is looking at things through various lenses that look at our discipline and how we know and understand from angles that we don't normally look at them. He's willing to go aside. And so his work on the digital then has taken him way aside in a sense. And that brings up the other quality that I think is important about him is the persistence. And one of the things those of us in the digital humanities find is that you need an incredible amount of persistence to make arguments, to get enough funds to get something done, to generate the kinds of attention and activity that leads to these kinds of events. And so these kinds of events show the value of that persistence. But nevertheless, we've been talking about the digital for many years now. And I've always admired how he has been able to maintain sanity and build the program, because we're both within the UC system, and believe me, it's almost, well, from what he's done, it's heroic. So the Gail project, I think, is an example of these kinds of qualities that Alan brings to history and the humanities. Alan.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Stefan. Stefan is in the Japan field. We have a hierarchical relations of, he's my senpai, which means he went through the program before me, which means that I owe him all kinds of deference. And thankfully, he owes me beneficence, right? You often make sure that my path is paved a little more smoothly along the course of my career. So always grateful to him. And I'm really grateful to be invited to come here today. This is a wonderful place that you have opened up. And I got to know some of the folks, Maura and Catherine and Jessica, at a conference at UCLA last year. And it was wonderful to hear about all the things that were going on down here in San Diego. And I'm particularly impressed with the group of participants, the colleges that you've got, the community colleges, the private universities, the state universities. It's a wonderful grouping of people, and I wish we could pull together that kind of collaboration up in Santa Cruz. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to come here today and to share with you some things that I'm trying to do with some students and with some photographs and whatnot. And so the talk, the subtitle is what we've gained by taking a DH approach to a photography exhibit. So this is a story about a group of photographs and what going into a DH approach to it has done to the work that I've been doing. So I'm going to jump into that. I have prepared about 30 minutes of talk and hoping for some Q&A time, and I know that we're a little bit behind at the moment, so I'll try to go quickly, and there will be plenty of time to ask me questions in more informal settings as well. So to jump ahead to the answer quickly, DH has really enhanced the public outreach and engagement of this project. That was the first thing that we were interested in doing with this Gail, what we're calling the Gail project is doing this as a public history effort. It has really enhanced a variety of research approaches that we can get from the photographs, and I'll be giving you some examples of that. It has allowed me to bring students, undergraduate students, into this process from the very beginning, and so all three of these things are actually tightly interlocked. The fact that students are engaged in this, that the students are engaged in research, and that the students are engaged in public outreach, and that the public outreach is made more effective by the fact that I have students working on it, and that the scale of the work that we're doing is something that is actually more manageable thanks to the fact that I have students involved in it. So the students are learning historical research, they're learning public outreach and all of that, and of course the project is enhanced by that, and it's also enhanced by the students in our goals to make this a collaborative effort with colleagues on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. So then finally, the thing that really interests me is, as Stefan says, I don't know that I got into this profession to do digital stuff. I'm not really that capable of it. But what I've found is that the digital also has allowed me to do more interesting things in the real world, and that the real world activities have fed the digital work as well. So I think for me, one of the really important things about this project is this feedback loop that's going on between the activities that we're taking in the real world and the work that we're doing in the digital world. And so I think these are some of the themes of this project. But I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory, help you understand this project. I have a colleague named Gail Hirschhatter, and I've had to assure her that this is not in honor of her. And this is not because she's, got an outsized ego. She deserves an outside ego because she's one of the most talented people I know. But this project is named after a man named Charles Eugene Gail, who was a dentist and also an amateur photographer. He would go out on shoots with Ansel Adams at times. He was really quite devoted to his craft of photography, but he was a dentist for his entire life. He was trained in dentistry during World War II at USC in the Army Reserves. And so when the war ended, before he was mobilized, he remained in the Army Reserves until he was called up in 1953. And he was stationed in Okinawa to run a hospital on an Army base there. So Charles Gail, this is him about to go off to Okinawa, leaving his family behind. And he's going to take, the only thing he's going to take with him besides his tools is his camera. While he was in Okinawa, he took a lot of pictures. 2007, his daughter, Jerry Gail, that one, she was retiring as the auditor of UC Santa Cruz, and she approached the director of a gallery on campus, the Sustanon Gallery, Shelby Graham, and she asked Shelby, would it be possible to do a photo exhibit of some of my father's photographs? My father's passed away recently. I'm about to retire from the university. I think he's got some nice photographs. Could we do a nice little exhibit here on the campus? I think the next slide is, yes, this is the Mary Porter Sustanon Gallery. So this is the space that she was thinking about. I don't know if anybody recognizes this figure, a local Santa Cruz. There you go, Jonathan Franzen, local resident, very famous. Get him in all the pictures you can. It gives us a little gravitas, I think. Anyway, so Shelby looked at the photos and she thought they had aesthetic merit, but she wanted to know if there was any historical merit in them. And so she brought them to me eventually. We didn't know each other at this point in time, but she found out that one of my areas of specialty is special research is Okinawa. So I'll tell you my response to that in just a second, but first I'm going to show you some of the photos just to give you a real quick sense of what he was doing. He took a lot of photos of people. We have these kinds of photos. We have these, this is like promotional material photo here, right? You put it on the pamphlet. Just charming daughter, granddaughter and grandmother. Smiling seed salesman who's taped together two pairs of glasses to make bifocals. He took a lot of landscape photos. He had a lot of photos of the daily life scenes. One of the things that he was really particularly interested in was the hand tattoos on older women in Okinawa, but also the activities they did in the marketplace. And then he had a lot of pictures of children, as you can imagine. This, by the way, he noted that only the family members can get the key on the dog's neck, which begs this question, what the hell is that a key to? So you can see in these photos here, they're pretty good as an amateur photographer. And they are really reminiscent of the style of photography that you see in like the UN-sponsored post-war photography exhibit, The Family of Man, which was a humanist universalizing photographers from all around the world, although I think 60% of them were American, to take photos of people from all around the world and get to understand the universality of humankind. Carl Sandburg wrote the introduction to this, and this photography exhibit was put together 2 years after Charles Gail took the photographs in Okinawa. But of course, Dorothea Lange was one of the people who was involved in The Family of Man, and you can see in this photo from her from 1936 the kind of style that was probably informing Charles Gail as he was coming along. His photos are very humanist. They are not directed at events. They're not eventful photos. And so when they were asking me what kinds of historical merit do we have in these photographs, I said, well, this isn't a set of photographs that are going to allow us to look at events like protests against American bases or, the struggle to recover from the Battle of Okinawa and whatnot. Rather, these are photos that are going to allow us to dig into the daily life of Okinawa at this moment of recovery in a particular way. And one of the first things that I noticed, there are two things that I noticed about the photographs right away. And one of them was that, again, there's lots of people in these photographs. The people their faces are clear and identifiable, and Okinawans have the longest life expectancy on the planet. And so one of the things I said to both Jerry and Shelby Graham right away was, we're going to be able to find these people if we take these photographs to Okinawa, and they'll be able to talk back to us. So we're going to be able to develop a photography exhibit in which the photographic subjects can talk to us about the experience. They won't necessarily remember that photo being taken of them, but they'll be able to talk about the experience of that time in their lives in the 1950s. Or their relatives will be able to tell us who these people were, and we'll be able to augment these photographs with a broader oral history of that time. And the other thing I said was that 1953 was an interesting year for these photographs to be taken, because from 1954 to 1956, the Americans expanded their land appropriations in Okinawa 1,000% to expand the US bases. So these photographs were taken at a last moment in time of this landscape and of this lifestyle. And so we have an opportunity to think about Okinawa in that moment before a major transition happens. And if we bring these photographs to people to look at the photographs from those days and to talk about what were the changes in the landscape and lifestyles after that, we would have another kind of thing that a historian finds very interesting, which is how to track change over time and how to think about what the characteristic of change was over time. So I had two starting questions for this. I said to Shelby and Jerry, yes, we should do this exhibit here at the Sustanon Gallery, and then we should travel it to Okinawa, and we should do an exhibition there. And I had two main questions. One of them, of course, is how did the photographer form his vision of Okinawa and Okinawans? He passed away, so I can't ask him questions. We do have his handwriting on the back of a number of photographs, and that gives us a lot of clues to not only what he was seeing, but how he was getting information from certain kinds of places. But the other thing that we can do with this is we can think about this in the broader context of American productions of knowledge and images about Okinawa in the 1950s. How many of you have seen The Tea House of the August Moon? Yeah, okay, one. So this was my parents' first date movie. Will that convince you to go see the movie? Will I convince you to see the movie if I tell you that Marlon Brando plays an Okinawan character in Yellowface? Right? So it's like, when I show it to the students, it's kind of jaw-dropping, right? They're like, that's Marlon Brando, right? Yeah, that's Marlon Brando playing Yellowface. It's an alarming movie, but it was started off as a novel written by a guy named Vin Schneider. It was then transformed into a Broadway play by John Patrick, and it won Tony Awards on Broadway, and it was then made into a film by Daniel Mann in 1956, mostly filmed in Nara. This is it's a classic representation of Okinawa from American eyes. Okinawans are, there's something humane and human about them. They understand how to resist the pressures of modern life, but they also, because they know how to resist the pressures of modern life, they're not quite modernized yet, right? The Americans are well-intentioned. They want to do good for the Okinawans. The Americans are also kind of bumbling and ineffective, and they need a good humanizing lesson from the Okinawans, but the Okinawans, frankly, need American help to be able to stand up in the world and not be, as a small island, crushed by their larger neighbors, or crushed, in fact, by communism. So, there's a lot of stuff going on about how Americans are forming these visions. And if I can't talk to Charles Gail, well, if I can talk to Okinawans who were in Okinawa at that time, maybe I can find Americans who were in Okinawa at that time or subsequent to that time, and also show them those photographs and ask them to reflect to us about what they're seeing in the photograph, and see if we can, indirectly develop a kind of set of key terms and whatnot, and perspectives on how Americans were viewing Okinawa at the time. So because I wanted to do that, I took digital copies of the photos to Okinawa, and I visited the Okinawan Prefectural Museum and Art Museum, and I showed them to curators and to the director there, and I said, would you be interested in having a show of these photos at your museum? They quickly said yes, they wanted the photos shown at the museum, and they, before I could even say it, leaped to the next stage, which I was already thinking of, which is, can we use these to do oral histories with Okinawans who were there at the time? One of their perspectives on this was the fact that Okinawan is they'll sometimes call it a dialect, but it's really, in terms of mutual comprehensibility, it is a distinct language from Japanese. So Japanese can't understand Okinawan. It's mutually incomprehensible. And of course, the younger generation isn't learning it anymore because of mass media, national education, and whatnot. And so Okinawan language has been designated an endangered language, and people in Okinawa, such as the folks at this museum, are interested in capturing as much of the audio of people speaking Okinawan as possible. This is the kind of project in which you're going to have 70, 80, 90-year-olds talking to you. Therefore, they were also hopeful that the project could produce that side benefit. So the thing that was really great for me about that conversation that I had at the museum was the fact that the directors wanted these photographs, and they had their agenda for the photographs. I didn't have to come and sort of foist my agenda on them. There was, coming from them, their own agenda that allowed for the possibility of a collaboration going forward. I also ended up talking with people at one of the two newspapers there, archives, other local museums, and there's a lot of interest in this project going over to Okinawa in the future. Well, we thought, if we're going to take the photos to Okinawa, why not just keep going, right? And one of the things that you think about with Okinawa is it's a very small place, and the Americans are a large and powerful behemoth. And if you're thinking about this Okinawan-American relationship in the 1950s, it can be overwhelming to think about how the Okinawans are dealing with the Americans. But actually, when you start to dig into that history, you realize that one of the things that's supporting Okinawans in Okinawa is an Okinawan diaspora, particularly the diaspora in Hawaii, but also the diaspora in Brazil. So began to think about how another possible source for us for thinking about Okinawa through these times is the diaspora, much of which was actually a post-war diaspora, although there was a very strong pre-war diaspora. So maybe we'll take this to Osaka or Fukuoka or Yokohama, where there's Okinawan migrant populations, or Honolulu, Los Angeles. One of my team members just this summer spent 5 weeks in Sao Paulo, and he announced upon return that there are 3 Okinawan associations in Sao Paulo. Okinawans constitute the majority of Japanese who migrated to Brazil, and these 3 organizations want us to bring the exhibition down there. And after the end of traveling it from all these places, I want to bring it back to Santa Cruz so people at Santa Cruz can see what happens when you launch a small project with a little bit of ambition, and you, like the trunk that goes with the ship around the world and gets stickers at every port. Everywhere we go, we're going to get more stuff, right? People are going to give us information, they're going to give us photographs, they're going to give us stories, they're going to give us responses, and we're going to come back with something that I think is going to be very big. So Jerry brought the story to Shelby, Shelby brought it to me, and then I convinced Jerry to donate the photographs to our special collections at UC Santa Cruz so the photographs could be protected, in part because we don't have the negatives anymore. So we don't know where the negatives are. And then we worked with the digital initiatives people in the library to digitize these things so that we have a high standard and that the library now has an investment in these photographs being circulated in some ways. And then I started to work with other people in the campus, including one of my closest friends, a photographer and a learning technologies ITS specialist named Tosh Tanaka, to begin to develop a team of people to work on this project together. I'll be telling you now about the students getting involved in this as well, because while everybody that I just showed you in the last slide are professionals at the university, it was really important to me that we get students involved as well. And as a historian, a lot of my students come from the history department, but it's been really important to me in developing this project that I get students from as many different places on the campus as possible. And one of the places that I'm most interested in getting students involved in is from the arts. And so one of my students, Maddie Thompson, was assigned the task of creating a logo for the project. And this is one of the photos from the Gail collection. And this is the logo that she came up with. So when you look at this logo, one of the things that you see is, of course, it looks like a camera lens. You can see the curvature of the lens here. We've got that sort of Nikon type font around the edges. And the other thing, of course, that you see is a reflection in the camera lens of a photographic subject. But the idea behind the design of this logo was that those of us who are working in the project are standing between the photographic subject and the photographer, right? We're looking at the camera. The photographer is hidden behind the camera. We're seeing what's being photographed on the other side. And it signifies that what we're interested in this project is people on both sides, the Americans and the Okinawans. And what we want to have happen is through these photographs, develop some kind of dialogue about what was happening in Okinawa in the 1950s, the 1960s, and 1970s. Now, once we started thinking about those oral histories and we thought about how we want Okinawans to talk to us, we want Americans to talk to us, we realized we were going to need an amazing travel budget, collaborators everywhere, or a web page. Now, we'd love to have collaborators everywhere, but we really need the web page, right? The first thought was we would put together a web page, we get the photos up on the web page, we work with veterans organizations, other kinds of people, we get their networks going, and then we'd find out, oh, there's somebody in North Carolina who wants to talk to us. We'll get them on the phone, we'll say, come to this site, we'll talk about what you're seeing in the photographs, what you remember and whatnot. But then we also realized that, oh, by the way, we're working in Omeka, because we're dealing with a lot of archival materials. Omeka gives us a nice way of managing an archival database, and I could say more about that at another time. The other thing we thought at the time was there might be better ways to go about this than simply directing somebody to the website and then on the phone having a conversation with them. So the library team, we talked to the library team, we came up with the idea of having a big red button. It's going to be much bigger than this. I keep saying to them, bigger, bigger. 90-year-olds looking at this. It's got to scream, click me, right? So we're trying, but you can see there's an attempt to give this that sort of, anyway, so we developed a button that when you click on a picture and it comes up like this button also appears, and you can click on the button, it'll turn on the mic on your computer, and then you can just speak. And when you're done, it will download a copy of the file to that person's computer. So, you know, grandchild can go to grandma and grandpa's house and show them the photos and say, hey, tell me about these photos. And then it'll be downloaded onto their computer so that she or he can take it back to their class or keep it for the family. And then a copy is uploaded onto our server as well. So this is created in Omeka. It's a free open access tool that we've built, and it can obviously be improved, but this is one of the big things that we wanted to do. And so building the button was an obsession for about 18 months. I can't tell you, as he said, persistence. I don't know if it's persistence or just, you know, flat out, what the hell else can I do? But 18 months of trying to get the big red button, and then the big red button got built, and we're very happy with that. Now, we have done a couple oral histories. I'm going to give you a little sample of one of them that we did with a woman who lived just the town over. Her name was Carolyn Kelly. This is her here. And this is her father, who was a civilian contractor with the American military and was working in Okinawa to build ports. Kelly told us that both her parents, whites, were actually raised in the Philippines in a lower class white, you know, settler colonial position. They were both held prisoner by the Japanese during World War II in the Philippines. They met in the camps. They got married afterwards, came to California, and just couldn't handle continents. They had to get back to islands. And so her father made up a resume that included graduating from university in the Philippines with an engineering degree. And so he got hired by the American military to run Cruz of port reconstruction. And one of the things that was really interesting about this conversation with her was that she opened up to us something that we hadn't actually considered, because in 1953, the Okinawan economy is really just barely getting back together again, right? And there's massive unemployment, and yet the Americans are bringing in Filipino laborers and having this man, can't remember now his name all of a sudden, William, I think. He speaks Tagalog. That's what he likes, that's where he feels most comfortable. And so we get the story about a Filipino presence that we hadn't quite seen in the photos. But then when we took the photos to Okinawa a second time, we showed the photos to people, and several people identified 2 people in those photos as, oh, that's a Filipino for sure. So thanks to these oral histories, we had these things locking into place we hadn't been thinking about before. This is Caroline with their Okinawan maid. You remember those pictures of the kids with the big shoes? She looked at those big shoe pictures and all the bare feet pictures. She said, "Oh yeah, you know, that's right. When it was time to give the maid a gift of some kind, we always gave them shoes. That was the gift we always gave because nobody had shoes in Okinawa." So suddenly those shoes, the big ill-fitted shoes, all the bare feet that you see in the photographs, again, take on an extra dimension of significance for us thanks to that oral history. There's lots of pictures of kids carrying things on their backs. Caroline also said, yeah, these are photographs that she donated to us, by the way. They allowed us to scan. Every bit, it was really one of the things that jumped out at all Americans was kids carrying other kids on their backs. And so here's a photo of her imitating that as she was a child at the same time. Again, this photo's 1954. Here's one of those photos that he talks about here with a kid on the back. And you've seen others as well. So these oral histories really opened up a lot of stuff for us. Just with this one person that we talked to in the United States, and she was a girl at the time. She wasn't a soldier or anything like that, but living in Okinawa, we got a lot of insight. And so again, this is something I ask everybody. If you know anybody who is in Okinawa at any time, give them my card or tell them where to reach me, because we'd like to show them the photos. And even if they were there in the 1970s, they look at these photos and they say, it looked nothing like this. That's useful, right? It gives us a sense of, you know, how radically was the Okinawan landscape and daily life changed. So we went to Okinawa and we showed these photos to people in Okinawa. And there's a bunch of photos of me showing them to people, looking at the photos. Got lots of interesting responses. This was my favorite one. We'd gone to a fishing village where I was sure most of the photos were taken. And we go to the fish market. It's about 10 in the morning. It turns out it's a national holiday. Look at your calendar, Alan. National holiday, right? Forgot to do that. And it's the last day we're there in Okinawa. And so the fish market isn't as lively as we thought it would be. But we found a table of a bunch of, if they were younger than 90, then I'm younger than 40 women sitting around the table. And so we approached them gently and we showed them the photos that we were sure were taken in that village. And the ladies looked at them for a little bit and they said, no, not from here. Just dismissed it right away. And I thought, oh my God, this was months of investigation, talking to all kinds of other people. I'm certain these photos were taken here. So we left after that. And then this woman chased us down and she said, I'll tell you why they're not from here. The hats are wrong. The hats are wrong. Those hats are pointed. The hats here were rounded. Again, it was like, thanks to that kind of insight, now we're getting a sense, oh, these photos were perhaps taken other places. And she said, those are fishermen from off, you know, from the smaller islands off the coast. So this is a different story than you thought you had. So again, that was not a formal interview. We're still looking to develop those formal interviews. But again, all of these are for me, the signs that, you know, doing these interviews with the photographs or opening the photographs up in huge ways. And the daily life insights that we're getting are tremendous. We did meet with a couple professors who run an Okinawan Studies Center. Gabe Masao here said to us, this is my students from one of their promotional materials, if America has a mission to fulfill for Okinawa today, it is to help build the image archive of Okinawa in those years. Please continue your work. It was a very nice thing that Professor Gabe said. So that brings us to the student part. This is a project that has become really student-driven. The student work on this project is central to what we do. Oh, thank you, yes. The students participate in this via seminars that I teach on Okinawan history, in which the central material is the photographs, and I ask them to develop research projects out of the photographs. I've taken 2 trips to Japan, 2 trips to Japan and 1 trip to Okinawa with the students, where we've worked with professors and students in collaboration. We've done tours of bases in the Tokyo area, and we've done lots of scouting and rephotography and interviews in Okinawa as well. The students participate in the project outside of their coursework. It is volunteer work, although we managed to raise $20,000 in a single day at Santa Cruz called Giving Day, when there was a big push to get donations. We raised $20,000 with an average donation of $50 in one day. So it was a pretty good return on that, with which we created research fellowships. So I'm paying students $1,500 a quarter to be able to just not work at a coffee shop and be able to work on the project in some way. But all of these activities that the students are doing require money. So one of the important things, and this is something that, nobody told us, Stefan, at Chicago, that you needed money to do this work.
No, we just have to be smart.
They just had to be smart. So it was gobsmacking when I came into the profession and I realized, oh no, I have to write grants and whatnot, and I have to figure out how to raise money. And I thought to myself, never again will a student pass through my hands without understanding that it takes money to do this stuff, right? So one of the reasons that I want to build in these real world activities into the projects is so the students understand that this is project development, and it will require all kinds of activities with the real world that sometimes entail some fundraising. They're building an exhibition. They're doing historical research and documents, oral histories, data management. They're doing project development. They've just got all kinds of things going on. And they're learning skills. Each of these I should say that we've got teams, a leadership team, an exhibition team, a documents team, a media team, a development team. Each of these teams has a mentor from the university who is a professional. So our director of development and humanities is a mentor to this group. We've got Tosh Tanaka, who's a professional photographer, is mentoring the team that's making a podcast and a video cast. I'm mentoring the documents team. Shelby Graham is mentoring the exhibition team. I'm running the leadership team, and students are working at every level with professionals, which is a great experience for them. So here they are with the photographs in our special collections. Here they are about to travel to Yokohama. Everyone's looking fresh and happy. Here we are touring a site of a major protest, anti-base protest in 1955 in the outskirts of Tokyo at a place called Sunagawa, the Tachikawa base. Here we are touring Yokosuka base, which is a naval base in Yokohama, working with local folks. Here we are at a museum this is a museum dedicated to Japanese war wounded. Yes, I'm wearing a tie.
I've ever seen you.
Yeah, there I am. Clean shaven too. We also started to develop a document collection. In the seminar, I had a former MA student who'd gone to the National Archives and digitized about 200 documents from the American military rule, focusing on land appropriation for base construction for his master's thesis. And he gave me those documents. And so I started using those documents in the seminars as well. And then one of my students in the seminar decided to work on that for his project. He went to the Provost of Stevenson College, got a $500 research grant, and flew to Washington, D.C., where he digitized another 800 documents from the National Archives from the American military rule. That was so exciting what he did that we gathered some money together, and I sent 3 more students. They spent 5 days, and they came back with 8,000 documents. So now we have a collection of about 9,000 to 10,000 documents that the students are working with. They're reading a whole variety of things in these documents, but they've also decided that what they want to do is make these documents available to people in Okinawa to see the record of how they were ruled by the Americans. So now we're back to a DH thing. We've got to process these things for OCR, right, optical character recognition, so that these things can be searched, that we can run large data, text mining kind of operations on them. The students are having to go through these things. A bunch of different kind of documents here. Oh, we've got the Naval Civil Affairs Department, their handbook for how you're going to rule the Ryukyu Islands once you get there. This was written in 1944, before the occupation had begun. We've got maps. And so the students are working as well with each of the documents and the Dublin Core Meta Standards to provide the metadata for all of these documents that they're going to be uploading onto the site. So every student that comes into the project first walks through the door of the document metadata work. It's slogging, it's unrewarding, and they get together and they do it a couple hours a week, and they just add all the metadata to the stuff so that when we upload. So they're learning the Dublin Core metadata standards, and they're working with the librarians, the archivists who are giving them a lot of advice on that kind of thing. This is a happy time of them working on the documents. This is a quieter time at the Bancroft. The Bancroft people are very stern. Students are creating exhibition plans. They're creating case statements for the project plans, business plans for the social media, for example. They're publishing essays. They're creating media, videos, podcasts. We've got a vibrant Twitter account and Instagram account and Facebook page and Tumblr page and a medium.com page. And they're producing stuff all out of there. And they're understanding that as they do their research, if they want to keep doing their research, they have to get that stuff out to the world. If they get the stuff out to the world, then the world is going to support them to continue that research. And so this is the other thing that we could never do, many of us, when we were in college. You wrote a paper, it was for your professor, and that was it, right? And that was the only audience you could have. And now these students get to think about what their audiences could be, and they get to think about the different media that they could produce to target different kinds of audiences. So there's our Facebook page, there's our Twitter account, there's our Instagram account, here's our medium.com page. Maddie, who made the logo, did this wonderful sketch for us in Okinawa that was the header to one of the articles they published. 2 more articles by students. We don't have as many articles up there as I like, but we've got one of the things that the leadership team has is an editorial board that nurtures projects from conception from students into publication at medium.com. Our students have had to go out and do public speaking at different kinds of events, present it to the public here downtown. My favorite moment was we had a big event at Santa Cruz, and one of my team members, Helen Porter, gave a keynote speech in front of Leon Panetta, some guy. I don't know who he is, right? Former Secretary of Defense, head of the CIA, something like that. And she talked about Okinawa and the bases in Okinawa, and afterwards Leon Panetta came up to her and he said, Okinawa was my biggest headache when I was Secretary of Defense. But she stole the show. She was, I know I'm proud of her, but she was better than him. And again, after this, the chancellor was watching us very closely, right? So again, part of all this outreach now is the administration is watching us and making sure that we're getting support, making sure that we're getting opportunities to get out there and whatnot. So again, in order to do the research, you have to do the development. When you do the development, you get to do the research. When you do the research and the development, you get to go to the places and you get to do the stuff. And that's the lesson that the students are learning. So with this, this website has its album where you can go to see the photos. It's got a vault where you can go to see the documents. Don't go there yet, they're not up yet. And it's got a studio. So very quickly, for the vault, what we're trying to do is we're preparing those documents for public research and use. And the big question that I have, and I don't know how to answer this, is how do we manage the interface questions? Because you can't just throw up 9,000 documents for people to use, right? You can't make a list, nobody can click on that. So what's the user interface going to be that will allow people to make some kind of sense and headway into this thing? You could create thematic searches and whatnot, that's fine. You could link things to a map, search by space, for example. You could search by year. But one of the things that you can do if you develop an interface, and this gets back to some questions that were being asked about data management earlier on, is you can think about the ways that your interface can help people to approach the data with certain kinds of mindsets. So one of the things that I want people to understand when they're approaching these documents is that these were social existences, not inert objects. They were created by somebody to be sent to somebody else to have some kind of effect in the world. So is there a way that we can create a a user interface that can allow people to approach, to understand these things as social existences that are in the course of production and having multiple temporalities? For example, if I go back to one image, this image here. This is a document from 1949. Pursuant to United States Navy Military Government Proclamation number 8, upon publication of this directive, all Ryukyuans in Okinawa Gunto in the possession of camera, equipment for the development of enlargement of photographs and undeveloped films shall register such possession with the chief of police of the district wherein such possession is exercised. Right? All cameras must be registered. This is clearly part of, one of the recipients of this is the organization that is engaged in anti-communist activity within the American military. And it's addressed to the chiefs of police in every town in Okinawa. And so the question here isn't so much what do you do with the registration? Who knows, right? Just register it. But if you're a chief of police and 4 years earlier you were under the Japanese Imperial Army, which was incredibly paranoid about spying, when you get this order from the American military, what do you do? Do you confiscate all the cameras? Do you lie to the Americans? Do you register these things? What do you do? That's the real question about these kinds of documents. What is its social existence, not just who produced it? So we're trying to think about that with the interface. And one of the thoughts we had was to think about something like, let's tag this to the org charts. And then we learned that the American military changed its org chart 16 times in 27 years. So now we have every document will come out of has two temporalities. You saw that document that I showed you with cameras had a red X on it. It was rescinded in 1953. So it's got that temporality. But then what part of the org chart does it come in? There's multiple temporalities. And this is the monster question for us in this project. I think this is the one that is, in terms of advanced research in digital humanities and public history, figuring out an effective user interface there is, for me, the holy grail. And I have no idea how to do it, and I present this at all kinds of conferences, and people smile at me and say, good luck, right? So if one of you can help me solve it, that's great. Finally, the studio portion of the page is where we want people to creatively respond to the photographs. Rephotography projects, art projects, creative writing. We illustrated with photographs from the collection, podcasting, videocasting, research that our students do. So one part is an album where you can see these photos. Another part is where you can dig into the past. And the third part of the page is that interactive site where people can upload their creative responses. Because one of the things I'm thinking is, young people in Okinawa today, how do they make a connection with these photos when they're so different from the lives they have today? So I wanted a space within that webpage for that kind of interactive response. This is an example of rephotography. Here's one of his photos. We found the place, it was amazing. And actually, when we found the place, we began to think about things like vegetation. This was 8 years after the war, and there was still this little vegetation. One of my students ended up doing a research paper on the long-term effects of napalm on the recovery of flora and fauna out of this kind of discovery. Finally, we have a new site redesign. So the thing that I've been showing you up to now is going to change a little bit. I've got a student who's a design enthusiast, and we're going to be implementing this new design starting next week. So finally, again, our project goals are public outreach, engagement, research, student learning, all interrelated, all interdependent. And our student has offered this as a new logo. We can debate that in a moment, and thank you. Do we have time for a question or two? I know we're over time.
Yeah, we are, but I think we can take a question or two, and then of course at lunch we'll have social time and people can have conversations, and then at the end of the day we have a drinks hour, and of course we
Right.
continue conversation then. So maybe one or two questions.
And I don't want to inconvenience the next group. So if there are no questions, then we can talk at another time. If there's a question. You seem to have one?
Yeah, I mean, first, this is an extraordinary project. I'm so glad that you come and present. So thank you.
Thank you.
I want to ask a really boring question.
Yeah.
If you had to do it all over again, would you pick Omeka? I'm really curious.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there's so many things to talk about. I mean, one of the things I thought to talk about was all the tools we've had to run through to try to figure out how to keep all the different parts going. You know, we're using Slack now for communication amongst the students. That's proving really effective for us. We're using Google Drive as a space to organize everything. That's also been proving very effective. Yeah, Omeka. It's great on the archival management stuff, right? If it was just the photos, we might abandon it. But once we added 9,000 documents, I don't know of another platform yet that's open source that would do as good a job. The other thing that is important about our Omeka choice is that I've been slowly building support in the university for this project. And one of the great days was, the University of California, Santa Cruz has the Grateful Dead archive. And they built a web page for it in Omeka. And they were done with that, and they thought, so what do we do now? And I happen to be a very good close friends with the university librarian. Our sons are tight. And so she knew about what I was doing, and she said, oh, maybe the library could support your project. Yes, right? That means now I've got specialists in the library who are Omeka coders and whatnot. They're the ones who eventually built the button for us, right? And so one of the reasons I'm sticking with Omeka for the moment is the fact that it's got the strong library support. The question is good though, however, because a lot of the stuff we want to do with like the user interface is how do you do that in Omeka? You can't do that. So this leads to the final thing that we're thinking about with that is the librarians have said, you know, if you want to have parts of the site that are not in Omeka, that's fine. We'll support the Omeka parts, and then you can develop these other parts that are a little bit more flexible. Because, you know, the thing that none of us like about Omeka, I think, is that their templates for exhibition are kind of unattractive still. I mean, people are making good things out of it. You got to put in a ton of labor. But it's a great question. Omeka is what we're using for a variety of reasons. One of them is the high value of the institutional support. Yeah.
Jessica, another one?
No, just-
That was fantastic, thank you.
Mm.
Such a great project, but also so wonderfully presented in terms of how we can learn how to develop project as part of a development.
Thank you.
And so my question is actually about that. Are you keeping a kind of narrative, meta-narrative of how you're doing this? I mean, you did that in your presentation, but one of the things I'm finding is that there aren't published models of how you do these projects or how you build digital humanities programs like we're doing, and that would also be so helpful.
Right. I've been talking to my students. I've been talking to my students about rigorously keeping everything we've got, you know. And I say to them, someday this stuff might wind up in special collections, because I know it's hard to believe, but someday this could be an important project.
Yes.
It might not be. I mean, I have a hard time grasping that it would become, because it's me, right? I mean, important things are done by other people, but right, this is what we're telling ourselves. It could turn out to be important someday, and somebody 20, 30 years down the road might want to figure out how we did it. So we got to save everything. Yeah, and now, so even now,
We'd like
right?
to know.
No, so even now, yeah. So we are trying to rigorously collect everything, and I am keeping notes and trying. I'm trying to get myself to write things up. And you all know one of the problems with this, of course, is there are so many foul ups along the way. So many things. I mean, writing this would halfway be embarrassing. Oh, there's the time that how did I let that go that long and not take care of that kind of thing, right? But as many people say, you know, knowing what your mistakes were is really useful for all of us. And so, you know, if I make huge mistakes and I publish it, you guys, you know, won't hate me, right? Because that's what it feels like sometimes. But I do think it's probably the most important thing that I can be doing at this point in time, in part because while I'm doing this, I'm doing no other publishing. Right, so my department wants to, you know, my administration wants to support this, but in some ways that promotion and review stuff that we all have to go through needs something. And I think the write-up of this is the best thing I could do in that sense. So I would love to try to draft something up and then get lots of feedback from folks like you about what would make it better or more useful. So,
All right. Well, thank you very much.
thank you.